Two people go through the exact same painful, uncomfortable experience. One version lasts 8 minutes. The other lasts 24 minutes, 3 times longer. Which one do they remember as worse? If you guess the longer one, real research says you'd very likely be wrong. In one of the strangest, most counterintuitive findings in behavioral psychology, the length of an experience turns out to matter far less than 2 very specific moments inside it. This is called the peak-end rule, and understanding it changes how you should think about vacations, relationships, difficult conversations, and even how you end your day. In 1996, Daniel Kahneman, Donald Riedelmeyer, and colleagues published an unusual but genuinely revealing study in the medical journal Pain. They tracked patients undergoing colonoscopy procedures, genuinely uncomfortable medical exams, asking each patient to rate their pain level continuously throughout the procedure, moment by moment, using a simple scale. Here's where it gets interesting. One group of patients underwent the standard procedure. A second group underwent a procedure that was overall objectively longer because the researchers deliberately left the scope in place for a short additional period at the very end, during which the discomfort was mild but still present, meaning the total duration and total accumulated discomfort were, if anything, slightly higher for the second group. Afterward, patients were asked to rate the overall unpleasantness of the entire experience, and separately, whether they'd be willing to undergo the same procedure again in the future. The result was genuinely counterintuitive. Patients in the longer procedure, whose final moments were comparatively milder, rated the overall experience as less unpleasant than patients in the shorter procedure that ended abruptly at a higher pain moment, despite the longer group having endured objectively more total minutes of discomfort. Kahneman and colleagues concluded that people don't actually remember experiences based on their total duration or their average intensity. Instead, memory of an experience is disproportionately shaped by 2 specific points: the peak, the single most intense moment, whether positive or negative, and the end, how the experience concluded. This became known as the peak-end rule. This single finding has enormous implications far beyond medical procedures. Let's look at the deeper mechanism behind it, and then exactly how to use it deliberately in your own life. Kahneman's broader research, building on this and related studies, describes a distinction between what he calls the experiencing self and the remembering self. The experiencing self lives entirely in the present moment, registering the raw, ongoing reality of what's happening, including, for instance, every minute of a genuinely tedious or uncomfortable stretch of time. The remembering self, by contrast, is the version of you that later constructs a summary, a story of what that experience was actually like. And it's the remembering self, Kahneman argues, that overwhelmingly drives future decisions like whether to repeat an experience or avoid it. Here's the critical insight. The remembering self doesn't average across every moment. It compresses the entire experience down into a handful of representative data points, dominated specifically by the peak intensity and the final moments, largely discarding information about sheer duration. This is why a genuinely wonderful 2-week vacation with one deeply unpleasant final day can be remembered as worse overall than a shorter, less eventful trip that ended on a genuinely pleasant note, even though, moment by moment, the longer trip likely contains significantly more total enjoyable time. Once you understand this mechanism, it becomes visible in a huge range of situations. A difficult conversation that ends with genuine resolution and warmth tends to be remembered far more favorably than an equally difficult conversation of the same length that trails off unresolved, even if the middle portions were equally tense in both cases. A meal that's mostly good but ends with a genuinely excellent final course or dessert is often remembered as better than an equally good meal that simply fizzles out at the end. A workday that ends on a small, genuine win tends to be remembered more positively than an objectively similar day that simply trails off into exhaustion. This also explains something specific about how people evaluate relationships and jobs in retrospect. A relationship or job with a difficult, painful ending is frequently remembered as having been worse overall than it may have genuinely been for most of its actual duration, because the remembering self weights that final, painful data point disproportionately heavily, sometimes overriding months or years of otherwise genuinely positive experience. Given how consistently this pattern shows up, here are 3 practical, research-supported ways to apply it deliberately. First, when designing an experience for yourself or others, a trip, an event, a project, deliberately engineer a strong, genuine peak moment and a positive ending, rather than assuming a uniformly pleasant experience throughout is sufficient. The research suggests overall duration and average enjoyment matter less to eventual memory than these 2 specific points. So concentrated effort on the peak and the close will likely produce a disproportionately better lasting impression than spreading that same effort evenly across the whole experience. Second, when ending something difficult, a hard conversation, a challenging project, a demanding day, pay deliberate attention to how it concludes, since the ending carries disproportionate weight in how the entire experience will later be remembered and evaluated, independent of how the middle actually went. A few minutes of genuine care at the close of something difficult appears to meaningfully shape the overall memory, out of proportion to those few minutes' actual share of the total time. Third, when evaluating your own memory of a past experience, relationship, or period in your life, ask directly whether your overall judgment is being driven by an accurate average of the whole experience or disproportionately by one peak moment and the ending, because the research suggests your natural instinct will likely overweight those 2 points regardless, and a deliberate, more complete review can produce a meaningfully more accurate, fairer overall assessment. Let's bring this together. Kahneman, Riedelmeier, and colleagues' 1996 colonoscopy research revealed something genuinely counterintuitive. Patients who endured a longer, objectively more uncomfortable procedure rated the overall experience as less unpleasant, simply because it ended on a milder note, demonstrating that human memory doesn't average an experience across its full duration, but instead compresses it down to its peak moment and its ending, largely discarding information about sheer length. This distinction between the experiencing self, living entirely in the present, and the remembering self, constructing the story that actually drives future decisions, has enormous practical implications for how you design meaningful experiences for the people you care about, for how you deliberately close out difficult conversations and challenging days, and for how fairly you're currently evaluating your own memories of past relationships, jobs, and experiences, which may be far more shaped by one peak moment and one ending than by an honest average of the whole thing. So here's the question. Is there a past experience, relationship, or period in your life that you've been judging almost entirely based on how it ended, rather than on what it was actually like on average the whole way through? Tell me in the comments. This is Turn Wiser, and I'll see you in the next one.